Steve, yes. Facebook. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Fredonia Central School District Board of Education meeting for March 19th, 2024. I think today's the first day of spring. Tonight at 11. Okay. We still got time. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. We start every meeting with a pledge of allegiance to our flag. Would Ryan Siri come on down, Ryan? That's good.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I have to explain what we do here. We always have a senior come forward, help us with a pledge every meeting, just to get our board, the whole meeting started off with the understanding that our students come first, and everything that we're doing here tonight is for the betterment of our students. We always call for one of our student leaders who will do great things when they leave the district. So thank you, Ryan. We have an agenda for tonight and a consent agenda. The adoption of the consent agenda upon a motion and a second and affirmative vote by members present approves each and every item so designated. However, prior to the adoption of the consent agenda, any board member may remove any item from the consent agenda. So if I could get a motion to bring the agenda to the floor.
So moved.
Mr. Hawk, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Marshall. So what I am suggesting is we pull out item number 7H, which is the recognition of the spectator and a trip that they will be doing. We're going to pull that out of consent, and we'll be voting on that. Is there anything else that a board member would like pulled out of consent? Okay, and at the same time, if I could, on new business, item number 7A1, I just realized that just now, as Mr. Hawk was saying something about it, the very last line of my agenda has a legal notice for the 23-24 budget vote. And that should be, that is a typo, it should be the 2024 through 2025 budget vote as presented. And I believe everything else should be okay. But with those changes, I'm asking the board, all those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, thank you. The board has reserved this time to hear comments from our audience. Those wishing to address the board are asked to stand, give their name and address, and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less per individual or group. Concerns and comments during this session should be directly related to items listed on the proposed agenda for the meeting. Do we have anyone who would like to address the board on anything with our agenda? No? Okay. So if not, we have the approval of minutes from our regular meeting of February 27th, 2024 is submitted. If I could have a motion to approve those. Ms. Powell-Fortner.
Second.
Ms. Brown, thank you. Any questions, concerns, amplifications, edits? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the approval of minutes from the Facilities Committee meeting from February 27th as submitted. Can I have a motion on those, please? Mr. Hawk, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Marshall. Any corrections, amplifications on those? If not, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Last on the minutes, we have the approval of the special meeting of March 7th as submitted. If I could have a motion on that, please.
So moved.
Ms. Hahn and Ms. Powell-Fortnall. Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the financial treasurer's report. And if I could, just, Mr. Forbes, the budget status, investment report, and revenue report together.
Yep.
As always.
Yep. So we're getting January and February same time because of the meeting schedule. So in January, the main items that were received on the revenue side were about $21,000 in scheduled tuition, non-resident tuition payments. And also, we brought in $47,000 of interest revenue during the month. In January, another $28,000 of interest revenue, $70,000 of VLT supplemental lottery aid, and also the first BOCES aid payment of $220,000. And I did miss one in January. We got a Medicaid reimbursement of $86,898. So as we've been seeing throughout the course of the year, the investments continue to be good with the treasury bills. We're running between 5.25 to 5.30 in interest rates, and they seem to be holding steady unless you go with real short term. Through the month of February, that was pretty much all that we've got out there except for one due to the timing of funds coming in. So we were at $187,000 of interest received for the year versus a budgeted number of $50,000, so that's obviously very positive. We did get our first supplemental aid payment in March for state aid, scheduled on the 15th. There's another one that'll come at the end of the month, so that'll allow us to kick some back out. And the target was $200,000, and I'm still hoping we'll be over that with some room to spare. On the expenditure side, things continue to track positively. The good temperatures we've had have certainly helped with the utilities. We're tracking right now below last year's levels, which will help against the expenditure side. Right now, we're about $550,000 below anticipated full budget costs on the expenditure side, and another $240 to the good on the revenue side. So we're about $780 to $800. If we could get that in the $800 to $850 range at the end of the year, that would be very positive for our fund balance situation, since we had applied $1 million. So fingers are crossed that we're tracking to there. So far, so good.
Good. Any questions? No? Okay. If I could have a motion to bring the treasurer's report to the floor. So, Mr. Hawk, and a second.
Second.
Ms. Powell-Fortnall. Mr. Forbes.
No comment on that report.
Everything good?
Yep.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the presentation of our first presentation of our 2024-2025 budget.
Yeah, I'll start and kick it off to Mr. Forbes. Each year, as you know, we begin building the budget for the following school year. Each year kind of has its own little set of challenges. As we know, one of the things that, at least in a district like Fredonia, a lot of our budget is based on state aid. About a month or so ago, we get what's called an initial run from the governor. That's presented us with a number that we believe will be in the ballpark of what we'll receive in state aid. This year there was a couple nuances in the governor's communications. One of the things they have done in the past is hold what the different districts, what they call, safe harmless in terms of foundation aid cuts, which means that you would not receive less than you did the prior year. and she had announced that that would no longer be the case. She also mentioned that there would be a part of the aid formula that would be attached to inflation, and that would be figured into the calculation. And she also talked about that most of the time districts will not receive less than a 3% increase from the prior year. And she also announced that that may not be the case. So we get this information and we get a number, and for us, that number actually didn't look too bad. There were some local districts that received less money than they anticipated, which obviously causes concern in those areas. Then that budget process moves to the New York State Senate and Assembly, and they have a chance to process that information. And they undid some of the things that the governor had talked about in her initial speech. So they restored the Safe Harmless Foundation cuts. They also rejected the proposed adjustment based on inflation, and they also restored or provided that minimum 3% increase for all districts. Now that sounds great, and if you're a district that received less, you're probably feeling pretty good about that. For us, we're not exactly sure what that means to that initial number that was provided for us. So each year we're in this situation of trying to build a budget when we're not exactly sure of what that state aid will be. It would be similar to trying to do a personal budget without knowing how much money that you're going to make each year, or maybe how much money you're going to get back in taxes or need to pay in taxes. So there's these variables in the process that have us in moments concerned, but we do the best we can to move forward. Tonight we have our initial presentation of where we think the budget will be. Typically we have a gap at this point between what our draft is outlined and where we need to be within the tax cap, and I'll let Mr. Forbes speak to that. And we do have a couple weeks coming up where we'll continue to monitor what's happening in Albany. Hopefully, New York State budget comes in on the deadline of April 1st, which would be extremely helpful to us. And then we move forward making adjustments as needed. So that's kind of where we are in the process. Mr. Forbes is going to provide some information specifically about our budget tonight, and I'm going to get on the IT.
I wasn't sure what she had in there.
There we go.
Okay, as Dr. Zillick said, we're going to take a look at the budget as it stands today. The process itself is a year-long process, as you mentioned. We get into it in great detail beginning in January with the receipt of our BOCES cost estimates at their annual meeting, and then the receipt of all the budget packets through the administrators and the building leaders so that we have a place to start and put everything together. From there, we then go back through and make sure things are coded correctly, things that we've estimated. We look to get final costs, things like health insurance through the Chautauqua County Trust because they typically meet later in January. Different equipment requests, we get final bids on those. So it's just kind of an ongoing process through the last 6 or 7 weeks. So as of today,
I'll deal with these out here. I'm not sure if
we could do it just by paper if we can.
I'm not sure why this isn't something John would work on here. Thanks, Mr. D. Can I just hang out? There you go, Mr. Ford. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Jones.
So this first slide is our proposed budget from the expenditure side, comparing 2023 current year to 2024-25. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner that right now expenditures were up $2.3 million, which represents a 6.71% increase in spending. A little more than half of that is in salaries and benefits, and you can see the distribution across the rest of the categories. The next slide is a similar slide, but coming from the revenue side. So state aid, we're up $1.7 million. 1.3 of that is increase in foundation aid, and then the difference is various categorical aids such as transportation and BOCES aid, and also changes to our debt service. Local sources, that's things like tuition, the interest income, rent for the people that rent in our WELOC building, that's up $27,000. And we've tried to reduce the amount that we're applying for fund balance. So in this draft, we've actually dropped it from the million of this current year to $800,000. For next year, in my mind, as we go through the remainder of the process, I want to see if there's a way that I can get that even lower, because I think that'll help getting us into the next year. Bottom of the page, we've got a comparison of the state aid percentages and the final tax levy numbers. And you can see that we've gone from a state aid level in 2021 of about 41% to about 48% right now in this budget draft. And conversely, the tax levy then would go from 52% to 47%. And they make up, those two categories make up the bulk of your revenue. We have some remaining unknowns in the process. Some of them are typical, some of them are not so typical. Final equalization rates and final assessments, those are items that we get during the summer, so that plays a factor in your final tax levy. Final BOCES costs, it's an ongoing process from the middle of January till now. We've got changes that occur both on the BOCES side as they go through and assign a specific attendance data to our cost. And then we have a constant evaluation of our special education services, the menu items of OT, PT, speech, social work, and counseling. Those tend to fluctuate by student, by month, so there's some adjustment there. In the initial process, we put in estimated amounts for alternate education, occupational education, and T-Tech, and those are becoming a more finalized number now. As a matter of fact, I got the middle school information just latest today, so those become a floating figure as we go through the process. We have not, in this draft, we do not have final, what we believe is final staffing. And as Dr. Zuliak mentioned, we don't have the final state aid, given that the state and assembly are talking about restoring the hold harmless and rejecting the adjustment to the foundation aid, and also the 3% across for districts. We don't know what that's going to mean for us. The preliminary figures that I saw in February were slightly better than what we had in January, but that may change once they settle all of that. And it won't be any clearer for us until we have a final state budget. In this draft, there are some big ticket items. Our occupational education is up 3 students, plus the increase in cost per student. So we've gone from 65 to 68, which is obviously a positive that students want to go into the type of programs that is available to them. We are up in the BOCES computer assisted instruction area by $75,000. This is necessary to pick up the Edgenuity and the iReady costs that had previously been paid for by the American Rescue Plan money. All of those Rescue Plan money grants expire on September 30th of this year, so we're not able to extrapolate the cost for this year or for next year over the whole year. It has to be done by September 30th, anything you spend. So we could technically pick up a month if we need to do that. BOCES computer services is a variety of things that make up that. Some guidance services, health service, all had cost increases there. New York State Employees Retirement System, the mandatory contribution percentage has increased, so our rate's going up to $83,000. Workers' compensation premium, we're in a consortium for that, and it's based upon usage at each site. And when they calculated ours, even at a 0% increase for the consortium, some districts went up, some districts went down. Ours, unfortunately, due to usage, went up $18,000. Health insurance this year was about a 3% increase across the board, which we felt was pretty good considering we had 7% last year. That's about $185,000 of cost there. With the RFP that we completed for student last year, we're estimating right now $385,000 increase in transportation costs for next year. We're still looking at that. It was just a big change from what we used to do on the CPI every year, and now we've got the contract amount, so it's been a little challenging to figure that out. So I'm hoping that number will come down. Transportation fuel, we're just projecting $10,000 right there compared to this year. Contract cleaners, about $18,500. They do our middle school, and that's based upon the prevailing wages that the state has to change based upon the changes in minimum wage. And then tuition for out-of-district placements, just to try to get what we're spending in line with our student population there. We're about 18,000 in that category as well.
Mr. Coates? So all of these numbers that you just went through, we really don't have any ability to impact their prices, things that are set outside of the district for the most part, or they were already contracted and like our bus contract?
For the most part. We still got hopefully some room on the transportation. Health insurance will take another run through it after the open enrollment, which is the month of March.
Okay.
See if anybody made any changes that are significant. Obviously, you take into account the retirees with the plans they had leaving and the people you hired coming in. So those kinds of things are still there. The out-of-district placements, that's probably still afloat as well. Talking to Kristen about who we may have there, and they tend to be a fluctuating population in the moment. So some of those are still flexible.
They're flexible, but we don't, once we get the numbers of how many students, that pricing is
Pretty
set.
much, yeah. So we're going to do another capital outlay, and as part of the budget process, we need to notify the public that this is included in the general fund. So we're allowed right now up to $100,000. The scope is not 100% final, but what we've been leaning towards is to continue the blacktop replacement at Wheelock School, and also it would involve classroom flooring replacement. I think we were up to 6 or 7 rooms, and that would also be at Wheelock School. Capital outlays, you can't do at 2 separate locations. You can only do them in one building, but I think we have the need for it there. And then we're also in discussion right now with the Architect and Facilities Committee as to what a good scope might be for the subsequent year capital outlay project. And then just a reminder, to do any outside work, there has to be a minimum of $10,000 of inside work. In this budget, we've picked up the resignations of the 5 teaching staff that have resigned, budgeted for 5 replacements, and also one of the 5 was eligible for the FTA contract retirement incentive, so we picked that up. We've also included all of the positions that were funded via the American Rescue Plan and continue those at this point in this budget.
John, could you just go over the American Rescue funds? How does that affect us next year?
Okay, same thing, it would be, anything we spend has to be spent by September 30th. So right now, there are different things that we earmarked on the front end that we haven't spent or may not spend. So we're going through the process of amending those grants. An example would be we put in some additional monies for music instruments, which require us to amend out another item. We also put in some money for math curriculum, which requires us to amend out other items. But some of the items that you're taking out are like face masks and desk partitions and things that were in the initial COVID when the grants came out that you don't need anymore. So all of those things have to be physically spent by September 30th. So again, we could do salaries for a month of next school year, but you couldn't do the balance of the school year as an example. So we probably have a couple $100,000 right now that needs to be shifted around to cover the things that we've done or will be doing between now and September.
So our fiscal year starts July 1st.
Correct.
So we have, the summer months to plan, but no real expenses.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the goal would be to spend all of it, so we want to have that done, which is why we began the amendment process in this time period now, so that we have a chance to get them in, get them approved, as opposed to sending them in and have them come back on the backside and say, well, we don't think that is applicable anymore, so.
So was there any value of the total amount that was given to the district still left on the table unspent?
Is there, in terms of what we
The
spend
amount
on?
that was given to the district, I don't recall, was that 2 million, 3 million?
Altogether, it was probably $3 million. The largest was the ARP 3, the ESSER 3, which was 2.1, and then we had a 500,000 APR 5%. There's a 100,000 for after school, 100,000 for summer. There's about a $10,000 one for homeless. So I know Cap Myers been working on things that we can do there. And then the first 2 rounds of the GER 1, ESSER 1, GER 2, and ESSER 2, those have already been finalized, completed, final cost reports submitted. Those were more technology and personal protective equipment and the front end of code, which they wanted you to do that then. And as things shifted, then we got into these other things.
So this dollar amount, does this bring us close to zero, or is there still money left?
That dollar amount is the salaries for the people that are being paid through the rescue plan money now that I'm bringing into general fund to pick their salaries up.
Okay.
So everything that we have in this year for salaries, we've got earmarked against people, give or take, depending what insurance they took and that kind of thing. Okay. So this slide is one that I've used in multiple years presentations, just a comparative look at our budget to see where we've been in terms of percentage increases and overall budget dollars. Right now, in this example, we're 76,000 below the administrative cap, not the tax cap, in the little print. So tax levy limit, when it initially came out, it was determined that it was a 2% cap, but it actually is not because of allowable exceptions. This year, for example, there was one line that we were able to exclude a little bit based upon the increase in the ERS rates. If the ERS or TRS rates go down, you're not allowed the exclusion. This year we are, so it didn't amount to a large percent, but it was a positive for us there. We have a tax levy limit right now of 1.71%, which is an allowable increase on your levy from 23-24 of 288,000. The levy in this proposed draft currently sits at 501,000 above that cap. If the budget were to be proposed to the community and defeated twice, you would have to still comply with the administrative cap. That's currently 76,000 under, so we'd be good in that situation.
Would that require a supermajority at 66%?
If you surpass the cap, yeah.
So,
Or the levy.
I guess so. We would be able to adjust that number if we had an increase in state aid.
Yeah, anything that you do, anything you add, whether it's additional revenue or expenses, will shift all those numbers as it goes through, because it depends on the expenditure side would depend on what you added or what you cut. And on the revenue side would depend how much you applied against the levy itself. So yeah, all those things, they all play a part.
So, okay. What is the total amount, 1.7, that the state is offering us right now?
Right now.
Okay.
Of that, 1.3 is foundation aid, which is your use it as you want to. The remaining funds are stuff that we spent last year through BOCES or building aid or transportation.
Like the money that we were over our budget, and any back on that.
And then this slide just shows the comparison of our final levy versus the tax levy limit. So you can see in the years with the X's, we were below the cap, including the last 6 years, up to 23-24. Your 5-year average for tax increase was 1.93, and your 5-year levy limit was 2%.
So I guess to follow up on another question similar to what I had asked just a minute ago, but we had passed a budget last year that we had brought to the voters and then received additional aid from the state.
Correct.
It didn't adjust the amount of the tax levy. So how do you see that adjustment happening? Because right now we're at 508,000 over. Is that the number? 501,000. So we're about $500,000 over. And how would we adjust our budget if the state leaders don't give us a final budget until after our vote?
All right, so a couple parts to that question. One, last year, we did receive the additional aid after the voters had voted on the budget. As part of the tax levy process, we applied a portion of the revenue in the revenue side of the budget, and then we offset that amount that we put in by additional monies to special education and transportation. And then there was a difference of about 45,000 or somewhere in that number that we then used to reduce the levy by that amount. So kind of multiple parts there. So right now, we're using the governor's proposal, which typically is the lowest of the state aid proposals that we see. That would have played true last year and seemingly does in most years. So pretty comfortable right now with the numbers we have, as long as they don't adjust the numbers across the board. The big one is the foundation aid issues that Dr. Ziliak addressed at the beginning of the meeting, if something big were to happen there. But you're probably looking at a situation where the districts that didn't get the aid have complained, they're going to do something for them. I feel in my gut that they're not going to come back to those that they may have got a little more and say, oh, we're going to help them, we're not helping you, because now all of us would complain.
So I remember that terminology is called bullet aid.
Yep.
So that was given from the senator at the time, not necessarily reducing anybody else's budget. It was just
Correct.
additional
And
aid.
it's been a while since we've gotten that, and I
Right.
don't even know if they still do that, to be honest with you. But yeah, there was the ability of them to assign a specific amount to a district, either for a specific item or as a, hey, we're going to help you out and give you an extra 50,000 kind of thing.
Could you kind of help me in my memory? When did they give that to us? Before the budget vote or after?
Well, that's a good question. I think it was just part of the whole process of them approving the budget, that they did it as part of their approval, so it would have been, give or take, April 1st. So that's pretty much the slides that I have for this evening.
So I got one further question, and that would be kind of a summary as to where we are with our fund balances.
Okay,
'Cause I
so,
didn't see anything here other than you were gonna go $200,000 less.
Yeah, so-
Applying 800,000?
yeah, so as we know, the last 2 years were brutal on our fund balance, so we're brought down to where we want it, a little lower than we want it to be, but in a much faster fashion. So because our budget was already established with $1 million applied against it, that became problematic because there's no way to really adjust that in the middle of the year without significant cuts. So things are tracking good, and we shouldn't have, unless something surprising happens, we should be like at least status quo kind of situation. And then moving forward, I'm trying to reduce what we're applying, which is a multiple step thing. You reduce extra that you carry, you try to reduce expenditures, a whole mix of things to get that number down so that we're not applying $1 million, we're applying 400,000 or 500,000, which ultimately should give us additional flexibility 2 or 3 budgets down the road, hopefully, if all things are good.
Any other questions from the board?
So, oh, go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
The busing and transportation cost, it looked like we're anticipating an additional, it was approximate, I think, $385,000. Do you remember what we incurred as an additional expense last year? Where are we tracking?
Well, the issue was that with the RFP, they changed the manner in which they were charging us. So as you go through it now, they've got the monitors broken out different, the runs are broken out different. So I've had multiple conversations the last couple of weeks with First Student to get a better handle on it. So right now I'm estimating it off of that, but for this coming year, we're at 2.99%. So if I can get a better feeling on where we are in this current year, then I can look at that number better and say, all right, we can adjust this down because 2.9 off of that, not off of that. And I'm not quite there yet.
I guess my question though is, looking back over last year, I know it was a different, or a new contract, but what are we up approximately between last year and this, where we're projected to be?
I can tell you that.
It's a very heavy hit, is it not?
So right now, I'm projecting about 1.7 million in total transportation costs for this year. And right now, with the increases there, I'm at 195.
And do you know where we were 3 years ago, before that new contract?
1.4. Now, a couple factors there. The contract up until this year was based on their ability to increase up to CPI.
Yep.
So in 3-4 years ago, CPI was 2%.
Lower, yeah.
The year before last, it was 6.5. So that's why you're seeing that big jump there.
Okay.
And so when we went with the contract, part of the discussion was, do we go CPI, what's our year to year, or do we take the hit at the front and then do it even off the back and hope that what we do off the back is below CPI, which is tracking that way right now, and then it's a benefit to us. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So to Aaron's question, Mr. Marshall's, on the back of historical data, the very last page, if you just flip it over, it said that 23-24 we incurred almost a 23% increase.
Yep.
But the years before that were 3.7.
Yep.
So, we hired a firm, and what was the savings, I guess, that reduced us to 22.9? I mean, where was it originally? That seemed like that was the original number.
Hiring the firm wasn't necessarily going to be a savings on the pure contract because your contract results are a bid process. And so having the firm was to tighten up the bid specs to see if we could have alternate companies come in and bid to try to get First Student to have competition. It also was an evaluation on the backside to say, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, or here's an option for how we can spread any damage on the first year costs over. So there really wasn't a direct, they're going to save us money by having them work for us. It was more, we want to make sure we got the specs tight, we want to make sure we got the bid out to as many people as it can go to, and those kinds of things.
And we only got one bid, right?
They had another company that was interested on the front end, but they didn't end up providing a bid.
So we only got one bid
Yep.
per student.
Yep.
And so they charged us 23% more 1 year.
Well, part of that is the change in the CPI, part of that is additional runs, part of that is additional fuel, so it's not a pure, and 23, 24 is the first year of the contract, which is actually up a little, and then the second, third, fourth, and fifth years are more level.
Okay. And they were able to hold to those percentages of 3.5, 3.7 because of the contractual piece?
Right.
Okay. So where is our contractual piece is what I heard Mr. Marshall's question. Where is our contractual piece? That's the 2.9 that you were just saying? Okay. So would you be able to separate that for us? You know, just to see what that percentage is?
Yeah.
Extend this out for, because this, some places this goes to the 23, 24, but it doesn't give us the projection of what you're talking about now, if there's going to be any change.
Yeah, we can, because the second, third, fourth, and fifth year are a flat percent. Once we have this year kind of locked in as to what the number is, because I said they changed how they're billing it, so it's a little, used to be monitors and the run were together, so you could go year to year and say, monitors run, monitors run, monitors run. Now it's, all right, this one's got less monitors, so that's changing the base price. It's a little more detailed, but once we have current year locked in, next four are easy, it's 2.9 times that number.
I just want to say the other thing the consultant is helpful in, so for a couple of years now, the request from Wheelock has been to create a Wheelock only run in the afternoon. That way we're not bringing Wheelock students here to the elementary school, transferring sometimes Mr. Drowninger up to 20, 30
It's a lot.
students. So that got that conversation going. We did a nice analysis of the runs and gave us an opportunity to reflect on that. At this moment, the plan for next year is to have a Wheelock run only in the afternoon. The feedback we got when we thought about it mid-year was families saying, hey, that we appreciate that, but that would cause a lot of need for us to adjust and adapt. So if you're good, wait till September and we'll have time to get that together. So we've just started to revisit that with an email from Mrs. Piper about where we stand, and that's in first student's hand right now. So again, the plan would be the AM run remains the same, but the PM run, students go right from Wheelock home as opposed to coming.
And part of that
To the
is
main
the
campus.
belief that we won't need to change any number of buses that we have, we're simply shifting them, so there should be no cost issue there.
So is that company done working for us, or are they still doing work for us?
I felt like right now they've completed the work that we asked them to do. And I think they were helpful again. Even if we didn't get another bidder, I felt like first student understanding, knowing we were working with somebody who has expertise in this area was helpful in those conversations. And I think it was well worth the money, especially with the aid that we eventually got back on.
Did they produce a recommendation that the board members can review?
They did, and I remember you asking about this, Tom, and I'm sorry. So we can get that and share that with you. So.
And also, Mr. Hawk mentioned the document, so this is the annual 60-page historical tax information, personnel information, and other stuff.
One more question on that. So page T9 is where it shows the state aid,
Yes.
but it only shows 22, 23. It doesn't show 23, 24.
Yeah, part of going through this, there's some that are and some that aren't, because some of the stuff I like to put the final number, and so if I put a number in there for 23, 24 and something didn't come in, then it's not final, so these are the finals, but if you wanted, then I can get that to you, no problem.
Yeah, I guess just the projection to
Yeah.
see the differences.
Yeah,
Okay.
I probably have that here, I'll give it to you before we're done tonight.
So, non-transportation question, and maybe between Mr. Forrest and Dr. Billiards, just to, again, kind of clarify, we're waiting on revenue sources we don't necessarily have control over. We're waiting on some understanding of students, some healthcare, those types of things. Are there any things that we are actively decisioning on and looking to evaluate that impacts this, or first we get those other numbers and then we decide if we have to decision on staffing, programs, et cetera?
Yeah, that would be preferred, and you probably have seen what's happening in Hamburg right now. Again, in my mind, no criticism of them, but they're using projected numbers to make decisions, or at least indicate decisions are coming that, are problematic for the district and creating a lot of reaction and anxiety, stress. So we would prefer to sit, wait, not panic about what may or may not happen. And then if it comes down to it, and we ran into this last year, the budget was late, we had to make some decisions, and then that additional money came after the fact.
Okay, so we're on our side, sitting tight at the moment.
Correct.
Got it.
So can you give the board kind of a timeline here for what date is it that we approve the budget, or accept the budget for voters?
Next meeting is April 9th,
Yes.
10th,
Nice.
so that would probably be a big discussion there.
What day do we have to accept the budget for voters?
I don't know exactly sure.
The calendar will be ready.
And our meeting after the 9th is when?
23rd.
23rd.
Yeah, we have to do the
Okay.
count back and see if 23rd would be okay, or if we have to do something prior to that. But we haven't discussed that yet.
Okay.
It's April 22nd. Is that what it says in here?
In terms of the legal notice, yes. And that's what John's talking about, is the back count in order to, and if you remember the calendar that was set last year, there is another meeting slotted in as a TBD in case we need to do that, to adjust and
Okay.
approve.
Okay. And we'll have the BOCES budget in there also. We know the date on BOCES. That's okay. That's all right. That's different. That's, okay. Any other questions? Mr. Forbes? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Next, we have the approval of the legal notice for the 24-25 budget vote as presented. If I could have a motion to bring that to the floor.
So moved.
Ms. Powell, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Murphy. Okay. Mrs. Ilias?
Yeah, I'll start, and Ms. Hines-Morrison can chime in. This is really, again, an annual notice. This is done every year. It's in preparation for the meeting and then our vote on the budget. Every once in a while, there's something additional beyond just the vote on the budget itself. Last year, we had the Student Board of Ed non-voting representative, which brought us Lacey eventually. So that needs to be approved by the community. Later on tonight, we will be talking a little bit about the term lengths for our board, which are currently 5 years, and potentially considering something less than 5 years. If that conversation results in a majority of the board feeling like we want to move in that direction, either tonight or on the 9th, that can be very easily added to the public notice. Obviously, we communicate that to the school community, letting everybody know that that has been added and adjusted. And there's part of a resolution here tonight also that empowers our district clerk to make that adjustment without necessarily needing a Board of Education meeting or vote. And all that is within the realm of what can be done. We're not going too far out of any protocols there that would prevent that. Anything to add?
Not particularly. The only thing, if anyone has a really good memory and has read every word, you will notice that there is a section in here this year for the election of members. Last year, we did not have anyone transitioning out from board seat. This year we do, so that section is back in. But otherwise, it's currently at one proposition, the budget, and then that's where we're at.
And the next item on the agenda would allow us to revise our notice,
Should we need to, yes.
should we need to.
Yes, that's
It
correct.
allows us to,
Yes.
yes. Okay. Any other questions from the board? No? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the approval authorizing our district clerk to amend the published revised notice of the annual school district meeting. Can I have a motion to bring that to the floor, please?
So moved.
Ms. Hahn, and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Goa. And just, I think everyone, we just kind of went over this, but just to explain.
Yeah, again, if, and probably the scenario which could play out is if we choose to amend or change our board term lengths, that needs to be approved by the public. That would be added to the notice in the form of a second proposition, and we would let everybody know that that's happening. So,
And the legal notice would have to be drafted at that time.
correct.
Yes.
Just as a point of reference, when it comes to doing that, while I am, as district clerk, would be authorized to do so, nothing would happen without us speaking with legal and making sure that all the terminology and all of the phrasing is correct. We go through the exact same process as we do drafting every other part of our legal notice. So, just in case anyone's,
Good.
I understand it might be a concern, we already have that handled.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on that? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the review of ballots for our CCSBA, Chautauqua County School Board Association Executive Committee members. If I could have a motion to bring that to the floor, please.
So moved.
Ms. Gallo and Mr. Hawk. Okay, so we have, there are 5 individuals here, there are 5 positions. It always becomes kind of a funny thing in that some of us know several of these people. There's 2 that I do not know, but I'm not opposed to that. And I guess I just leave it to the board to say if there's a board member who will not support any one of these people, which I guess that's possible, that we understand that, and then from there, if we don't have anyone with any concerns, that I would just accept that we would support all 5 of these individuals. So is there anyone who stands out that you couldn't support out of this group that you would know of? It always becomes difficult to go through this, but hopefully we're all on board here. So if we're all okay. Now, I know, Ms. Hahn, you have gone to several CCSBA functions, and these individuals help put those on and help determine who the speakers are and what the topics will be. So,
Well, what jumps out at me is Sylvester Cleary is outstanding.
he is. Now, Sylvester had sent me a letter, and I guess it was just me and not anybody else from the board, but it was part of the backup.
Yes.
So you have that. I couldn't agree with you more. He's a very interesting individual. Very, very much in favor of our students. So, yes. Any other comments? Okay, if not, we have a motion to cast a vote for all these individuals. We're not going to pull anybody out, so if everyone is okay with that, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next. we go on to item 7H, and that is if I could have a motion for the approval, to approve the request from Ms. Reinhardt and Mr. Paskey to take the students for the Spectator to Saratoga Springs.
So moved.
Mr. Marshall. Ms. Powell-Fortner. We could have put this through consent, but doggone it, this Spectator has won more awards than you can shake a stick at. How many is this now in a row?
5 out of the last 6 years.
5 out of 6 years.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Not that we're counting.
Yeah, not that they were counting. It's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of great traditions here in Fredonia. This has become absolutely one of them over this time. We appreciate Ms. Reinhardt and all she does, but it's also a student-led organization with the students really participating and taking an active role in really putting that together. Mr. Paskey usually takes the trip to Saratoga. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
Just a fantastic group of kids, again, just every year. It's interesting because you want to say almost like, oh, you did it again, but they did it again, and each time it's just up another level. It's so awesome to watch the quality of the paper just increase, even though, I say, hey, we won best in the state again, we won it with like a flourish, if you will. It's just, it's outstanding. Just great job to our kids.
And if I could just comment, I know that there has been an individual that has written for the Spectator, been involved in the Spectator, who has gone on to do some great things in college. I have personal knowledge of that. But anyway, I think that's where it starts, and that's why I think the Spectator has been tremendous, and it's not just here. It passes on to students beyond graduation. I think it's a wonderful thing. So, with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The board is reserved this time to hear comments from the audience. Those wishing to address the board are asked to stand, give their name and address, and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less per individual. Is there anyone who would like to address the board tonight? No? Okay. Next up, we have a discussion item. It's the opportunity for board members to discuss things that are coming up that we have issues on that we don't like to, we don't like discussing things in emails amongst the board because these discussions are part of a public meeting. And we feel very strongly that when we discuss things, that the public understands what the board is thinking, what our thoughts are, how we come about certain decisions. So we try not to discuss these in emails amongst ourselves, and this is the opportunity that the board has to go about the process of making decisions amongst ourselves so that we can later vote on it. So one of the items that we have kind of flagged for a discussion is the, I would like to think that this is a typo and that it really should be the term length, not the term limits. So it's looking at, right now the board has a 5-year term, and we're looking at just discussing whether we should reduce that to a 3-year term. And the concern that I had was with a lower term length, that we would be losing certain expertise, some consistency, some experience from board members who are going off the board. So it was just a discussion to to discuss the number of board members and potentially increasing that. So with that, I know, Ms. Powell-Fortna, you have kind of raised this issue of reducing the term length, not limit, but the length.
Thank you for recognizing that.
From 5 years to 3.
Yes. And I think, whether it's 3, whether it's 4, I think we started having conversation about this just for transparency, over a year ago, and, maybe missed our window last year for this process. And I think, what raised or came to the surface was that we have seen maybe somewhat of a trend or more frequency of board members not fulfilling their full 5-year term, and that results in our board appointing till the next election. And I think the opportunity to discuss if that's something that the public should be able to weigh in on, if our board members, if we're seeing for whatever reasons that members aren't fulfilling the 5-year term, if that's a barrier in terms of completing the term and or gaining interest to run. And again, if that's something that should be brought to the public as we're handling those turnovers internally to the board, and allow the public to weigh in on how their board members are selected.
Just a reminder, you do have a summary sheet of some of the discussions we've had in the past. Just a couple things. So if there was to be an adjustment, and typically the term length is 3, 4, 5 years. If there was an adjustment, that would be phased in over time. Like this year, if we did move forward with a change, the 2 seats we have up now would eventually go on that lesser term. In terms of local districts, roughly 15 of them have board members with 3-year terms, only 1 with 4 years, and about 9 with 5-year terms, including Fredonia. And talking with local other superintendents and just with some representatives from NISBA, it doesn't seem like there's a right or wrong answer to this. There are pros and cons in it, and it's just a matter of what the district feels works best for them. Ms. Fortna had come forward after one discussion and said about 74% of the districts in New York State, so there's roughly 700 districts in New York, 74% of them have 3-year terms and about 22% have 5-year terms. So just a little additional information, but that sheet is available if it's helpful.
Comments?
So I think having been on the board the longest amongst this group here, I sort of have seen and heard why people have left the board, and it never really seemed to come up as far as the length of the term. It was things taking place in their personal life, changes, moving out of the district, taking care of family members, those sorts of things. I also feel kind of like an outlier because I think I'm the only one that was voted in on this board. Everybody was appointed.
Actually, Mr. Marshall.
Were you? Okay. For some reason I was thinking differently.
Wait, wasn't I voted in? You sure?
Well, originally appointed.
No, I wasn't voted in.
Oh my, so I
Yes.
really misspoke. I apologize. I thought there was more, and to Lisa's point.
Well, there's 4,
Yeah.
sitting on this
Yeah, I know
current
Steve
board.
was, right. So I guess to that, there was a big transition to where, we were appointing. And it was somewhat of a pressure cooker as a board member because it put you on the spot because you had a lot of good candidates. But I don't know as if somebody that was serving a 3-year term wouldn't have stepped away any different than if it was a 5-year term. Was the point of what I recall, having been told what was happening. So to that, seeing the information that was just pointed out again, Yeah, there's people with 3 years in the 40s. The array of term lengths. So, yeah. I'm not opposed. I just feel as if a person really gets their momentum at a 3-year point, and that last 2 years makes a difference, and you're not worried about running against people and whatnot. So I guess you could run for a 5-year term if we had 5-year terms and 3-year, right? So
I think that we would be changing, I don't think that we would have a 3 and a 5-year. It would be a straight one or the other.
But going forward,
So the
you-
present board would keep the terms that they have,
okay.
and anyone new being voted in would have the new term length.
I would have a problem with that, in my thoughts, having served 3,
Okay.
If there was an option for 3 and 5, I might go in that line.
Yes.
I guess I don't have really strong feelings, but, I mean, if you serve a 3-year term, then you can run for another 3-year term. And then if you win, then you have that continuity. And if you don't, maybe the community has spoken that they want a fresh voice. So I don't see a downside to the electoral process. And I guess when I first ran, I was elected to the balance, which was a 1-year term. And when you add a 5-year term onto serving a balance of a term, that does become, just think, I remember thinking about it, and I was like, 6 years, that's a long time to serve on a board. No? For me, it is.
No, if I could correct you, and I may be wrong in this, but I believe that you serve a 5-year and 2-month term.
No, I was elected and served 1 year.
correct.
And then I ran again. I ran unopposed. So the first time, it was a full election. I ran, I was elected, I started in June, and I served until the following election, and then I had a 5-year term. So I will have served 6 years when my term is up.
And I think to that point, that would be a 5th member, your seat was vacated, but it was in time for the election,
Right.
not outside of election time, right?
Right, so, yeah, okay.
So for me,
So you were elected, and my memory was it wasn't a
a full
5 years,
term. So for me,
it was taking
it
over
would have
another
made a
position.
lot of sense to me if I served the balance and then had a 3-year term over that. That was a big decision to run for a 5-year term, because I don't like to step down from something I'm elected to before my term is up. So I'm wondering, are there community members who would be interested in serving, but 5 years is prohibitive to them? So there may be some excellent people in the community who would run for a 3-year term, who are going untapped. That's a concern I have.
So the other piece that I know that became an issue, having worked with 3 different superintendents, is the superintendent search. And so at one point, we were at a superintendent search at the same time with an election, which wouldn't really make any difference whether it was 3 or 5 years. But I guess I'm thinking out loud. It really was something that I recall having been an issue for somebody to run again, for the continuity as Hans says, to just not have to stop and start that search over again.
If I'm not mistaken, we've kind of taken a different approach to those short terms, in that if there is an election, and I guess I was mistaken in how that worked out, and I apologize. But had that happened today, at your first election, you would have served a 5-year term. It would not have been a 1 year and then run again, and after 1 year.
But she was complete, same with me, I did about 8 months my first, because I was.
You were appointed.
But I was completing somebody else's
Correct.
term.
But
Right,
you
so
were
you're saying-
appointed until the next election.
Uh-huh.
You weren't elected, you were appointed.
But that was only because in Ms. Hahn's case, because the person
It was,
stepped
it
down.
was close, it was
prior
prior to
to-
the
Right.
board vote, the budget vote.
Right, so
Yes.
we could have had a board appointed prior to the vote, and I think we had that conversation and said, do we appoint, or do we, it's close enough that
Correct.
we allow the voters to, but when somebody resigns in September, you know, it forces us into that situation of appointing, which has happened except for one who resigned in time for, you know, coinciding with an election.
I don't have very strong feelings either, but I think to avoid the appointing as much as possible, because it really should be elected by the public, I think the 3-year would probably help that situation. So, and hopefully people would, you know, come on for 3 and decide to stay for 6 to get some continuity. So I would say go with, my opinion would be the 3, just to try to avoid the appointing as much as possible, because it should be public.
I would just echo Sheila's. I worry that 5 years is a daunting task. And to think that I might be looking at that in a few more years, I don't think I have that in me. But 3 years, I don't have that in me either. It's a lot easier.
I mean, to point out, my kids have been out of school probably 12 years, maybe, I know it's been over time, so, you know, it's kind of a different position when you don't have kids in the district, but I think it's a much more important piece to really have that time on the board and be a part of the public education. So I'm kind of torn. I mean, yeah, I think you're going to draw more people with 3 years, but I didn't have any problem with a 5-year commitment. And like I say, the other people that left were for different reasons, not necessarily not feeling connected or whatnot. It was personal. So, yeah, I guess put it to the voters, right?
Yeah, so my concern is that the 3-year, as opposed to the 5, won't affect someone resigning midterm. Well, that's my concern, and we don't know. And if we look at the members who have resigned midterm, that the 4 of us were appointed to, it's impossible to tell if those were 3-year terms, if they would have resigned midterm. It's impossible to know. I'm not convinced that will eliminate the appointment of new members. Life happens, and people are going to resign from the board just because of things going on in their life, and we can't predict that, nor can we do anything about it.
I agree that we can't predict it. I think, you know, the longer the term, I think there's more chances of life happening, right? The further, you know, the longer term. And I think the other thing is, while we're focusing on that appointment thing, a point of it, there's also the other positives that we've talked about is, you know, allowing maybe people that don't feel they don't even get onto the board to have life happen because 5 years is too long, that it allows for more fresh perspectives to come in potentially, throughout the rotation. It allows the public more frequent opportunity to say, is this board member representing my views, than once every 5 years. So, I mean, those are positives as well, set aside that we have appointment, that we have life happens, those types of things.
I guess going to the 3 years more in line with how I see people moving and changing often in today's society. And to have that 5-year commitment is like saying, this person is staying in this job for X amount of years, right? We're seeing, I mean, especially you would be seeing the turnover. And it doesn't necessarily create a better turnover, it's just creating turnover. And a 5-year commitment is a more serious person, I think, than a 3-year. Because you're standing up and you're saying, I mean, there's sometimes, boy, it would have been nice to not have to come to a meeting. But, and a lot of times that, it's my wife's birthday, our anniversary. Yeah, gotta go to the meeting. I think it would have made any difference in my decision if it was 3 or 5 years. But I do believe that person making that commitment has a longer time without going through the process of being elected or worrying about getting their signatures. Because our 2 important jobs are the budget and superintendent. The rest of it is the superintendent and the budget. Right? So I think the person 3 years in really is just getting a grasp on the budget. Yeah, you can run, but you could say, you know what? The heck with us too. And much like society today, when things get tough, maybe we just don't hang around. And that would be my concern. Or, much to what you're saying, you make an opportunity for somebody to be appointed. But that hasn't been what I've seen in the past.
I contacted, I'll talk to other people who know more, who know a different perspective, and contacting the New York State School Board Association does realize that there are benefits to a 3-year term. And part of that, one of the main things that they talked about was, well, if you have a board with several people who have been on the board for 3-4 terms, that it's good to get new members in, to get new blood. But we've got, we got 2 members who have been here less than 3 years, and you've been here 3.5. So we've got new blood here. So it's not, that's really not one of the things that the board needs. The board doesn't need new blood.
Right now, today.
No, you're right,
So
but we're voting on it today, okay? So the issue that the New York State School Board Association is that it really takes 2 to 3 years for a board member to understand, to have the experience in the major items that we're looking at. And budget is one of the main ones, and that it takes a while to understand that process. And it's a concern if it's only a 3-year term. The second one was the consistency issue, and that having board members who have been here through several cycles provides consistency. Consistency with the budget, consistency with contracts, consistency with, even capital projects. You look at what we're going through now with our capital project, and it just helps to have someone who knows these processes and knows what's happened in the past. But the big thing as far as consistency and experience that I would be very, it's why I'm in favor of the 5-year. And that's, when I look at our superintendent, and I look at all of us and anyone in their job, and having a new supervisor, a new boss, a new set of customers, that there's turmoil there. There's a change in environment that I think has the potential to put a lot of stress on our superintendent, that I would rather keep a more consistent board that is tweaked rather than has larger turnovers that a 3-year term would have. And what I'd like to say is, I have heard it said that the board that hires a superintendent is not the board that fires a superintendent. But the superintendent, there are statistics that say the success of a district is highly correlated to the length of the superintendent. So the longer the term of the superintendent, the better that the school district functions. And part of that function is due to a consistent board, giving him a consistent message.
Brian, I think having a 3-year term doesn't necessarily do anything to the consistency of the board. Tom would just be running more frequently, or I would run, it's not an either or.
I guess I don't see it that way, but
I can tell you as my example, right, as I approach the end of my 5-year, I don't want to do 5 more years, but I might consider 3.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from. I think I echoed Sheila. So I just wanted to point that out. They're not exclusive. The two can exist together, I think. It just would literally be running more frequently, which you could make the argument might deter some people. Sure, absolutely. But if 25 signatures is going to deter you from running for a school board position, I would question, so I just wanted to, they're not exclusive. I just want to make sure that that's out there.
Okay.
And can I just say, I have to disagree with what Tom said, that it's a less serious person who runs for a 3-year term. I just have to go on the record as not agreeing with that. To me, that's not correct.
I didn't mean any offense to anybody. I hear like Mr. Marshall Aaron saying, you might do a 3-year, but not another 5-year. And to the whole process, I've seen that if something gets in the way of you completing your 5-year, okay, you would step out, and then somebody would be appointed. I mean, really, that's what we're talking about, right? Is because there's been such a turnover.
So if I could, I think that we all have different opinions. And I don't think that, I'm not going to apologize for my opinion. And I'm not going to criticize you for yours. I respect your opinion. I respect all of your opinions. And just, if I disagree, that doesn't mean I don't respect it. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay.
I just want to be also respectful of the public and people who may run for positions on our school board, so that's why I had to say that.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
If we're going on record, I just didn't want to offend. I
Yeah,
didn't make
well,
this statement to
I think-
offend anybody.
Yeah,
and I get it. I get it. Okay? But is there an option to go to several different, you've got 7 members, so if you had 4 of them that were 3-year term and 3 of them that were 5-year term, is that an option?
I don't know.
Does Dunkirk do it that way? Is that something that Dunkirk does?
I'm not aware of any board that does.
So I guess we could be
Look into
Dunkirk, right?
I mean,
I guess it's a compromise, right? And it would make the option there.
So how do we proceed in order to, I think the goal was to decide if we can or cannot put this on the ballot this year, right?
Correct.
So how do we get from here to there?
Well, if it is the desire of the board, I would need a motion, we'd vote on it and move forward.
I'm just curious, Steve's input, he will not be here next meeting, or?
He
do you
will
have
be,
time?
he will be.
So are we?
So in regards to that, I can tell you what Steve will say, okay? I do not like it when people speak on behalf of someone else. And if Steve wants to say something, I think that Steve has to be here to say it himself and respond to it.
So, to that point, do we table this discussion and not make a motion tonight, or?
Well, we wouldn't table the discussion. We would just pick it up as a motion at the next meeting to vote on a 3-year term. We could discuss it with Steve's input at that time, and then vote on it, have the legal language prepared if we do decide to go to a 3-year. And
That is possible.
Yes, so essentially what would happen in terms of the legal notice, the first legal notice, we have no option, it has to run April 2nd, that's just, that's what happened. But there is no language that says the legal notice that runs on the 2nd has to be the same one that runs the next 3 times. So if something, you want to hold off, you want to do the motion the next time, get Steve's input, we could then, because the meeting is the 9th, have the language ready, and then the next legal notice could run. If it comes to a vote, if, however that shakes out, we could be prepared to change the legal notice if that is the
To the math of, like, because Lisa and I are both up this next, so our terms end. So to the math, let's just say that our 2 positions were put to 3 years, not affecting the other 5. How would that work out as far as whether or not you have 4 members or 3 members up 1 year?
I should be able to plan that for the next meeting if it kind of seems like everyone's.
I could tell you.
Okay, do you have it?
I looked
Yeah, I
at
don't
it.
have that memorized, so
So
if you do
just
that, great.
in a 3-year term, what would happen is that with the seven members, you would have 2 members 1 year, 2 members 1 year, and then 3 years, 3 members. I mean, that's just how the math will work for a 7-member board, that they would roll every 3 years. So just like.
But if we had a blend of 3 and 5-year terms, that's what I was.
I guess it would,
That
it would depend on what the numbers were then.
Because I think at some point, they might align.
I would think there's just no way to predict that, because you'll never know. People could leave early, some people
But
will
the
stop at 3
position,
years.
much to like Sheila, was voted in for a year term. And then she had to rerun the next time that person that was, whether they had a 3-year term or 5-year term.
But Brian's saying now she would have just been voted in for.
Instead of being appointed, she was so close that they ran to election.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah.
All she did was finish somebody's term, elected to do it.
Okay, so we will agree to put this on the agenda for next meeting? Okay. It takes us to our superintendent's report. Mr. Zilios.
Yeah, a couple things fairly quickly. Many people came and talked about our nurse situation, the fact that we have 2 nurses on staff out of 4 that we typically have, so 2 vacancies in play in the district right now. We have come to an adjustment in our arrangement with the SSSA. If you're paying attention, we've posted a couple positions for nurses at a higher wage. This also includes a pay increase for all SAA members, so we're glad to have that moving forward. In the meantime, it has been quite a job to keep our health offices rolling. Our two current nurses, Kashel Malkins and Courtney Emke, have really gone above and beyond to keep this and make this work. Meg Narroway, who came on recently as our nurse assistant, has done a nice job getting in the mix and getting up to speed. Melinda Bell and Jill Lundeen have done a great job just helping, supporting the offices more from a clerical point of view. Sharon Kaminsky has done a great job at Willock, offering support with some EMT training in her background. And also Mrs. Piper has done a great job jumping in. Obviously, Wheelock, when you look at it as a math problem, has a lot less students than the main campus, so there's been times that we've had to have Mrs. Malkins here, and that's been a burden, we know, and we'll touch on that in a minute. So thank you to all those individuals for everything they're doing and continuing to do. It would be nice to think that we might have an applicant who maybe is not currently working or is maybe coming back to the field, and that would speed up their transition to the district. So we'll see what applicants come in, and we're going to move as quickly as we possibly can. The work on our building condition survey and potential upcoming capital project continues to work. Young and Wright offered to us our next board workshop on April 23rd. That would be before our next meeting. They just noticed a trend that a lot of boards were asking for instead of coming back on another night, but they're open to options. They want to throw that out there as an option, 4 p.m. And then we would have our regular scheduled meeting at 6. Maybe we can follow up on that when we break after adjournment. They followed up with Mrs. Piper, who missed an initial conversation. They also had a conversation with Mr. Lauer and our coaches. And I believe they have a conversation with the music department here on site coming up on Thursday. The scans and audits that were happening are all complete. Roof scan, playground audit, structural evaluation, site survey. We are waiting for those reports, but the work has been done. Many people were here on the first of the month taking a look at that work, or late in February, early this month, so that's great to see that moving forward. We also made an announcement, just sharing, that we did make an adjustment to our instructional calendar. April 8th, or the Eclipse Day, was not going to be a day with students anyway, but we have postponed our professional development on that day to May 6th. May 6th, which was going to be a half day for students, we will not have students in session at all, and we'll have a full day of professional development for adults. We are also tomorrow at AC talking a little bit about our instructional calendar. I would think that the board would see that in the weekly communication coming up, in a quick survey of faculty members at least, and remember we do create the calendar with collaboration between the FTA, the FAA, and district office. And about 70% of our faculty claimed that they would prefer or would like to keep the 2-week spring break as opposed to the split break in February. So we're working our way through that. Our administrators will have a chance to give some feedback tomorrow, and I would hope that potentially at our next meeting we would have a discussion and potentially approve a calendar with some, you having the ability to have your eyes on it prior. Our strategic planning moves forward as well. Our survey right now is at 281 responses, which is pretty good. Our capital project survey had about 250, so this is doing pretty well. Shout out to our parents who have 98 people responded, our faculty 72, and our students. Lacey, I don't know if you've been out there. 64 students responded, so that's pretty good. If you happen to be a board member or an administrator who hasn't done that yet, it'd be great if you could do that in the next 24. Yeah. But we're moving forward. We have a meeting tomorrow night, which will begin to sift through this data. And again, at this point, we're looking for priorities and trends and what is it that we're hearing from our stakeholders that's important. And then we'll dig a little bit further into what that might look like in terms of focus areas, goals, and action steps. Other than that, had a good conversation with Mr. Paschke today, and I think he and I had a little misunderstanding about some postings of a social worker, but he definitely wanted to keep this conversation alive here in the district. As a building principal, I certainly understand him advocating for what he believes his building needs and what would be helpful to the students at the high school. I continue to be a little reticent and hesitant with where we are with our budget, and that conversation is revisited and open for anybody who might care to comment. He also shared that Mrs. Piper, because of what we described earlier, is really taking on a lot of additional roles and responsibilities at Wheelock. This is also with the changing population at Wheelock. It's a little bit more lively from a behavior point of view. And the question came of how can we possibly support Wheelock and how can we support Mrs. Piper in that work. We do have an AC tomorrow, which actually you won't be at, but that would give us a chance to have a conversation amongst the admin team about what could that look like from district office, what could that look like from administration, what could that look like from the faculty and staff in our building. So we will have that conversation and see where that leads. I don't know if anybody wanted to chime in on either of those two topics.
Yes. So to the budget piece, I heard you comment about the state holding what we received last year. Is that kind of in the works as to what's happening?
I'm hoping not.
No. As a minimum. As a minimum, we're going to receive at least what we received last year.
Yes, that's
And
according to what we heard from the Senate and the Assembly, yes.
So, I guess to that, the additional monies that we received allowed us to put that .6 in there for a social worker that we never hired this year.
Correct.
Okay, so actually, we're only looking at .4 that we need a budget for.
Yeah.
Okay, which would make it easier and a little lighter lift.
Yeah.
So, to that, is that being looked at with intentions of doing that? Is that built into this budget?
Well, we had that discussion about, so let's just say, because you could make that argument that we could do that now. We haven't spent the funds, so we could hire a 1.0 right now. My concern was whether we could continue to have that position moving forward and not bring somebody in for, let's just say we did this mid-year, and bring somebody in for half a year and not know whether or not, I could look at them and say, hey, this position will be here next year. With the ARP funding being at let's just ballpark it at about $500K, that had me concerned. I'm starting to feel like it's possible that we can carry those positions and potentially do more, but I'm hesitant to put a flag in the ground that we could definitely do that with the variables that are in play right now. As I said a number of times, I'm not arguing the need for a number of things across the district. I'm not trying to indicate to anybody that these things aren't important or I don't understand where people are coming from. I'm just trying to be cautious and not put ourselves in a situation where we overextend and then the fallout results in people that we've recently brought on board, thinking that we could maintain.
So, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what you're answering me with. We had a .6, and we still have those funds, right?
We do.
Okay. So actually, this coming up budget, all we have to do is serve .4 to have a whole one, right?
Yes.
And is that in this budget?
Right now, no.
Okay. So,
But what is in this budget is the $500K from the
Which has gotta
ARP
be
position.
which needs to be spent by September 30th?
Well, no, I'm saying the value of the ARP positions is roughly, we'll just ballpark it at $500,000. So that was incorporated into this budget, based on conversations at our administrative council saying that the feeling was that those positions are critical. So that 500K is built into this budget.
So to the point 4, if we receive additional aid that we're not seeing right now, would that be included?
I think we'd have to talk about what other things people would like to be included. Ms. Farrow has made a case for a couple of special ed teachers. Mr. Paschke's a little concerned about his sections at the high school, and what we might need to do there. Again, I'm not judging any of these things right now. I feel like
I'm not judging, I'm just asking where we are with the budget, because budget was part of the conversation this evening, and the social worker is part of your topic this evening in your superintendent's report. So I'm just trying to put the two of them together to sort of see where we're at with that.
So I think I'm understanding that you're saying you're not actively seeking a .6 anymore because you don't want to mislead someone possibly about, or not mislead them, but only offer them a partial year position.
Well, we posted a .6 so many times, it just doesn't seem to happen. What I was saying is that if we're all tempted to bump it up to a .0 and say, hey, you know what, let's just go with it and see what happens. Hopefully we can maintain that. However, I don't know that that's fair to somebody that we might bring on board, especially if they were leaving a position in another district. So, you know, everybody who's in the ARP funding, we had that conversation that this position is an ARP funding that's going to end in 3 years. We're hoping, and it looks like I think we look pretty good at this moment that we'll be able to do that, but there was no guarantee in that. And some people walked away who maybe had a position elsewhere. Other people took a chance.
Dr. Ziliak, but I think the conversation at this point where we're saying we have to cover that $500,000, we're absorbing it, the funding is going away, is that the admin team has said that those positions come first. That we're prioritizing funding those positions first, and then we still have these outstanding needs, right? Because we could say for those ARP positions that there's something that isn't a priority anymore because we want to bump up the social worker. But at this point in time, where we are is we're saying that keeping the ARP positions and absorbing them into our general budget is where the priority is.
That was my impression. I think the conversation we had is, are they critical or not critical? And the feeling was they're critical.
Could you just clear up what's, regarding WheeLock, what is it that we're looking at? An administrator, more teachers, what is that request or ask?
To offer support right in the moment,
Yeah.
it would have to come from our existing
But I mean, what position?
staff.
Like an administrator?
The activities.
Again, there's been moments, I've gone to Wheelock if Mrs. Piper is not here, there's been moments, Dr. Wright has gone to Wheelock, there's been moments other administrators have gone to Wheelock. We haven't tapped, I think, too much into faculty and staff beyond the ones that are shared at this point, but that could be a possibility.
But I guess that, I think what I'm understanding, Ms. Bello, maybe is what are the activities that we're saying, okay, here's what you always used to do, which was fine, now we have new stuff, or just more of that stuff that we need to cover.
So, for example, I've been sitting in the nurse's office because we don't have a nurse. We also have had a lack of time between the school psychologists that resigned and the new one coming on board, so I've been covering those services, so that's why I think that I see tomorrow because I'm covering school psychologist duties. I'm running those meetings all day tomorrow. So, also, to the social worker request, the behavioral needs of our children have grown exponentially. If you recall last year, I had a concussion in dealing with a student, and I'm trained, I'm a school psychologist, and I was trained in CPI, and I'm currently trained in safety care. We currently have another staff member that's dealing with some injuries. The behaviors are beyond a lot of our capabilities at this point. And so a social worker to be able to come in and address some of that would be huge. I had Cassie Farrell at our school building today for 2 hours, but then she had to leave. I was dealing with behavioral issue while dealing with CPS meetings, and I was also covering the nurse and the psychologist. Cassie gave me a suggestion that I threw at the teacher. It's just a lot going on. And honestly, it's myself and our secretary, Peggy Brisky, who's doing a lot of this. So that's what we're going to detail. And that's why I would say the school social worker would be vitally important to be able to come in and help you with some of those things.
So this is an additional that you're speaking of that would help with things that we're not giving you? Okay, so that is critical. And how does that get onto the critical request list? Because that's what I've been hearing is it's critical. And so to the budget piece, how do we finesse the budget to afford the .4 additional to meet with the .6 for a 1.0? Because I'm hearing critical here.
Or remember the .6 was a request from the high school.
But it was in the budget. So, and it wasn't, so I guess, I'm trying to keep it simple here, right?
Sure.
How do we get that full-time person, because we already got over half of the pay in the budget?
I think now, Tom, it could be two. It could be two. We're saying we need one for the high school, which is the .6 that we already talked about. But now we're saying we need a second. So.
Yeah, I get that. So, I'm trying to get one. Right?
If we got one, it would not help you, is
It
that
would,
correct?
because right now I have Ms. Farrell at my building 1.5 days a week. And so if they added the .4 those other days, Dr. Zayas and I have talked about that. If we
And so
added-
isn't that, the 1.0 is designated pretty much to the middle school and split with the high school, but now she's going down to Wheelock?
That's what we had spoken about, because
I mean, so this person is really getting dragged all over to all our different buildings. Clearly, there's a
Right.
critical need.
So the social worker that's split between the middle and high school typically stays there. What we're talking about is Mr. Drollinger created some time for the elementary social worker to go down to Wheelock a little bit more than was originally planned.
It seems as if we have a critical need, and I would like to hear more on this from you as to meeting the needs of our administrators.
Understood.
And I just really need to go on record saying that we've never requested a .6. We've always wanted a full-time person. The .6 concept came from the fact that Kat Beyer, our current social worker, is working .6 in the middle school, and we wanted her to come to the high school where she was only working .4. We wanted a full-time person from the get-go. Moving her to the high school was an additional .6 for the high school. The full intent was always, and in the emails, a full 1.0 for the middle school replacement. There was never a request for a .6, ever, okay? We need to have these people. Obviously, Amy has indicated there are injuries going on at the Wheelock school. We need, it's critical. Also, we have not prioritized those positions for the 500K in place of or above the social workers. That was never done.
So will this be something you'll have in discussion at ACD?
I certainly hope so, yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Patchke, I remember a .6. I could be wrong.
No, we've never requested that. You can look back at the emails.
I'm not.
Okay. No, the
Just say
.6 was just the
that's what I
addition
recall.
to the high school to make that full-time.
Fair enough. I'm not.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Okay, so our next regular Board of Education meeting will be April 9th, 6 o'clock right here in the high school library. Again, I will reemphasize, if we need to get our long-term planning SWOT analysis in by tomorrow. you have a superintendent's, boy, my mind just went blank. We've got to do your annual review. So you've got to get that,
To get your most to,
yes,
get that sound.
yes. Also, if I could just throw out a thanks to Mr. Ziliaks for finalizing our, the MOA with the SSSA and resolving this. I think that with everything that we've discussed here and all the back and forth, I think that was a big win. So thank you very much for your efforts in doing that. So, Ms. Gullo, anything to add?
Nothing tonight.
Not even on the musical?
Musical is phenomenal.
Okay,
Phenomenal.
okay. Ms. Alforga,
Same.
anything on the, nothing on the musical?
Great musical.
Okay.
I'm sure everyone's pushing for spring break right around the corner, so
Yes,
all good.
great. Mr. Hawk?
Great discussion this evening, and like to see where everything goes.
Yeah. Mr. Marshall?
Great job on the musical.
There we got some.
Sorry, that's it.
Loved the musical.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very good. Lacey?
First flag football game Thursday,
Oh, really?
and then Bill Stadium on Saturday.
Great.
Wonderful.
So that's the thing.
Great. Mr. Paskey?
Congratulations to our musical, all of which, everyone who participated. We had parent-teacher conferences this past Thursday, they went very well. This is Inclusion Week. We are dressing up all week to encourage inclusion in our school. Our senior activities, for our final senior activities for the year, the infographic is completed today, so that information will be going out to our seniors and senior families. We are working on discussions and bringing in stakeholders to have discussions on how cell phones might roll out next year. There's some changes in possible policy there. On April 18th, we have a Holocaust speaker coming for all of our students. That will be at 1:30 p.m. On April 18th. We're all invited to come. It's a Holocaust survivor. There are very few left, obviously. It's been a long time since that occurred, so I think this is a great opportunity for our students that Dave Denz, our social studies teacher, has continued to do each year, and I'm very thankful for that. I think that's it.
Great. Ms. Plumhouse?
Our E&L department put on a fantastic cultural fair a couple of weeks ago that our students had an opportunity to expand their cultural awareness, foods, crafts, activities, things like that. So it was great. I believe there was 20-ish countries represented, so that was exciting. And on Friday, we are continuing our partnership with SUNY Fredonia, and one of the professors is coming in to work with our 8th graders to deepen their understanding around the eclipse. So that'll be an exciting opportunity for them.
Great. Great. Mr. Drowling here.
Yeah, a big thank you to Miss Havier. She's the parent of a first and a second grader who fed Wheelock and elementary faculty and staff this past Monday with Pakistani food. It was delicious and it was quite the spread, so big thank you out to her. And then when we get back after break, a local illustrator, her name is Sherry Bialy. She was a former editor for The Observer and now illustrated a book called The Boy Who Never Threw Anything Out, and it's about Earth Day and recycling. She's going to come and do a reading to our first graders and give away some fabulous prizes. So we're excited for that. And yes, we're ready for break too.
Ms. Piper?
Big shout out about UPK and kindergarten registration that's going on right now. So we've got some yard signs out, and if you know anybody that needs to register their children for pre-K or kindergarten, it's happening right now. So call us and we'll get you all set for next year. We had the McKenna School of Dance Irish dancers come perform for our students on Friday. The kids loved it. They brought some students up, showed them how to do the Irish dance, and it was just a really great day. And shout out to Mr. Lauer. He and I went to the SUNY Fredonia Job Fair. I don't know, it seems a long time ago, but I think it was just last week, to try and recruit more substitutes and nurses. So thanks, Greg, for going with me and spending the afternoon there.
Great. Ms. Farrell?
So Mr. Paschke mentioned Inclusion Week, which is this week, Thursday. March 21st is also National Down Syndrome Day, so it's March 21st. March is the third month. 21st, Down syndrome is represented by 3 21st chromosomes, so there's a meaning to that date. So as a part of the inclusion week, Thursday is dress in team apparel, but National Down Syndrome Day also wants people to wear funny socks or mismatched socks, and the idea is that if you're wearing some crazy socks, it might spark a conversation, and the conversation would be around education about Down syndrome and the importance of people with Down syndrome in our communities. That's all.
Great, thank you. Mr. Forbes, nothing? Ms. Hans-Morrison? You're good? Okay. So the board anticipates the need to enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters and collective bargaining agreements. If I could have a motion to move into executive session. Ms. Dole? Mr. Hodge. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are in executive session at 7:57. Thank you, everyone.
All right, signature, yeah, anybody here? You got it? Yeah.
That was the
I didn't have a whole lot of Great to see you. Absolutely.
Take care. Oh, no, Ethan. Oh, to Disney World.
Yeah, he told me. I forgot about that.
How you doing? Really good?
Yeah, it's going. Godspeed. It's crazy. The lines, did you see?
My husband is a Disney.
Is he gonna get there?
So we ordered new waiters. And he's like,